For those of you who went to school way back in the 1990s and late 1980s, you probably remember that instead of having nice big iMacs or desktop PCs, you had these computers, the infamous Compact Mac. And today I thought I'd be showing off this old Macintosh Classic II from 1991. These machines were very common back in the day, and this model in particular was the last of the Compact Mac series to use a black and white display. The second to last in the Compact Mac series, the last being the Color Classic. Now, this machine definitely has some design differences over its predecessors, i.e. the Macintosh SE, SE30, and even the original Macintosh Classic. The Classic II was a step up from the original Macintosh Classic, as every model came with a hard drive, whereas before, earlier models, there was a floppy-only model which did not include a hard drive, and then there was the model that included a floppy disk and a hard disk. The Classic II ended that and came with either a 40 megabyte hard disk or an 80 megabyte hard disk. This one has an 80 megabyte disk. The Classic II also was the first Macintosh to feature audio recording capabilities, however not internally or from right out of the box. The first one to be able to record audio right out of the box was the Color Classic, although the Macintosh Classic II has a microphone in port, whereas the original Macintosh Classic did not. And of course the design changed a little bit. You can see if we compare the Classic II to, say, the Macintosh SE, which I'll post a picture of, you can see that there are definitely design differences on the computer from what this model was derived from. So let's go ahead and take a brief tour before we get into the actual machine. On the front of the machine we have I believe this is a 9-inch CRT black and white grayscale display, monochrome, with a 512 by 342 resolution. We have our 3.5-inch floppy disk drive here, and the Macintosh Classic II and vintage Apple logo branding. As for the keyboard and mouse, this is not the original keyboard. I will post a picture of the original keyboard, which is the Apple Keyboard 2. This keyboard came with later Macintosh Performa models and was used for Macintosh computers which supported soft power. This particular model does not, because if you hit the power key on the keyboard, which on later Macintosh models would start the computer up, it does nothing on this model. So this is not the original keyboard. The original keyboard did not have a power key, and I believe this is the Apple Design Keyboard 2. Yes, the Apple Design Keyboard. It's upside down, but yes, it says Apple Design Keyboard. However, the mouse over here is the original mouse that came with the system, or would have been the original. I got this off of eBay a couple years back, so I don't know if this is the original mouse that came with the system, but this is what would have come with the system. This is the original Apple desktop bus mouse. Now this is not the original Macintosh mouse. Come on, camera, focus. This is not the original Macintosh mouse, which was a slightly fatter design and had a button that actually stuck up and was a darker gray color than the beige color of the mouse. This was just a redesigned version of the original Apple desktop bus mouse, or original Apple desktop mouse, which used an ADB connector, but on the other hand used a button that was more flush with the mouse design. The sides of the computer are really nothing special except for the left side of the computer, which features the interrupt and reset switch. The programmer's button or interrupt button was commonly referred to as the crash button because if you push this button while the system was booting up, you'd see the sad Mac error, which indicates a startup failure. However, this was not intended to crash the system. If you had a programming device connected to the system, programmers would push this button to write software for the computer. If you push it while you're in the operating system will freeze, and you'll have a terminal prompt, or equivalent terminal prompt, where you can actually write programs with the right hardware for the computer. On the back, you have all of your I/O. As you can see, it says Macintosh Classic II here, and this sticker says it was manufactured in August of 1991. There's also the fan grill here, which is the intake for the cooling system. You have your power connector here and your on-off switch here. There's also a knockout plate here, which I don't think I can get with one hand, but underneath this would be the adjustments for the CRT. Up here you have your carrying handle with a grill here for cooling. And down at the bottom where the I/O is, you have your lock connector, which was not a Kensington lock, but was used on older Apple computers to lock the device in place, kind of like a Kensington lock, so it would help prevent it from being stolen. You have your microphone in port, the first compact Mac model to feature this port, because the original Macintosh Classic did not have this port on it. You have your ADB, or Apple Desktop Bus Connector, which is where your keyboard plugs in, and then the mouse daisy chains to the underside of the keyboard. You have your floppy disk connector port, which in 1991, external floppy drives were becoming useless because Macintosh computers then had internal hard disks, so you didn't really need an external floppy drive to put a startup disk in to boot the system like you did with the original and early Macintosh computers such as the Plus. You have your SCSI port here, which was, because obviously they didn't have USB in 1991, so you had to use SCSI on Mac computers. This would be used for something like an external hard drive. Then you have your printer port here for connecting something like an Apple style writer. Your modem port if you wanted to connect a modem, or for something like an Apple Talk or something similar. And of course your audio out port for connecting, well, not back then, it wasn't really headphones, but external speakers or something like that. So now let's go ahead and boot up the system and give you guys a brief tour of the Mac Classic II. This has had a fresh install of System 7.5.5. The original operating system, I believe, was either System 6.0.8 or 7.0.1. However, this machine has been upgraded to run System 7.5.5. The maximum version of the Macintosh OS that it can run is 7.6.1. So let's go ahead and start this machine up. And there was a startup chime. You may or may not have heard it, but it is very quiet on these machines. So in a second here, you'll see the Happy Mac symbol. There it is. And you get the infamous Welcome to Macintosh message. And this is exclusive to System 7.5, where it actually starts up as Mac OS. Earlier versions of the system software would just say Welcome to Macintosh, load the extensions, and boot to the desktop. The reason I'm running System 7.5.5 on here is just to have a newer operating system. It is a bit sluggish, I will say, because System 7.5.5 was really meant to run on Macintosh Performa machines of the time. However, it definitely runs fairly well on here. It boots up fairly quickly. You can see it's loading all the extensions. Just to quickly go over the specs of this machine, it has a Motorola 16 MHz Motorola 68030 processor. Originally came with, I believe, 4 megabytes of memory, but this machine has been upgraded to 10 megabytes, which is the max amount of RAM that this machine can handle. It has an 80 megabyte hard drive. It could also be purchased with a 40 megabyte drive, a 512 by 342 resolution monochrome CRT, and a 3.5-inch floppy disk drive, and of course System 7.5.5. So now we're at the desktop. Let's go ahead and get a closer look at the machine. So here is the Macintosh Classic II desktop. Let's go ahead and delve in a little bit. We'll start by going to About This Macintosh. You can see System 7.5.5, 1983 to 1995 Apple computer, 10 megabytes of memory. What's interesting to note is on System 7.5 and later, you'll just see it says Macintosh with the older Macintosh logo there, whereas on System 7.1 per se, it would say the actual model, Macintosh Classic II. And it did say that before I upgraded to 7.5.5. Also, System 7.5 introduced the control strip down here, which is similar to the dock later in OS X. However, the control strip is not the same because you cannot launch programs from it. I mean, well, you can, but it's not. It's more for adjusting settings. For example, Apple Talk, or change the resolution, for instance. You can turn up the sound on it. And then there's some other stuff that you can do there. Go ahead and take a look at the control panels here. I have it set to go as a list. Now, obviously, the PRAM battery is dead because it thinks it's August 27th, 1956. And obviously the time is not correct either. But that's just one of those things that computers do as they get older. As for brightness, the screen brightness on older Macintosh models was adjusted with a switch underneath the Macintosh on the underside. However, on the Classic and Classic II, the brightness is adjusted through the software, so you just move the slider back and forth to adjust the screen brightness. And then, of course, we have our general controls window here, which on System 7.5 looks completely different from previous versions. For instance, it has options to protect the system folder, applications folder, a warning if the computer is shut down improperly, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the applications we have installed on here. Now, I don't have much installed on this computer, but I do have a game and a useful application that we can use. So we'll start with the game, which is Simcity. Go ahead and launch it here. This is Classic Simcity from 1989, version 1.4G. And as you can see, we have all sorts of scenarios we can pick from. So let's go ahead and pick, how about BEM 1965 traffic? Or Bern, okay, Switzerland 1965. It tells us a little bit about the scenario and that we have 10 years to complete our objective. We have a city map here, which is displayed on classic versions of SimCity. We'll just go ahead and explore a little bit. You can see the roads are definitely a mess. And there really isn't much to show as far as SimCity is concerned, but the best part, and I think everyone remembers this part from SimCity, is the disasters. So let's go ahead and do a tornado and just do a quick demonstration of the disasters. And as you can see, there's the tornado destroying the city. It seems to just be tearing up our power plant there. Doesn't seem to... oh, there it goes. Okay. Kids back in the day used to have all sorts of fun when their cities went bankrupt. They'd start all sorts of disasters to completely destroy and wipe out their city. Yep, there goes the police department, and something exploded too. All right. Well, that's enough of that. I just wanted to show a quick demonstration of a game running on the Classic II. And we'll go ahead and fire up Photoshop, because this does have an original version of Photoshop 0.63. Go ahead and open up a file that I created here, just some wonderful, wonderful artwork that I created, just to depict my piece of crap computer teacher who's an authoritarian jerk. I decided to recreate him in Photoshop just with my horrible artwork, or actually, no, you know what, they're awesome artwork skills, I'll say. Just so that just to make it kind of interesting. And I called him Fatty Doo-Doo, which some of you might know from a South Park episode. But there he is, there's Fatty Doo-Doo, my piece of crap authoritarian computer teacher who I dearly despise. You can see we can move his head around here, and using the select tool, we can use the lasso tool to drag words around. We have a zoom tool, which we can use to zoom in and out. We have 400, 800, 1600. And okay, so you hold Command to zoom back out. We have the Crosshair Tool, which I don't really know what it does. I guess we can't use it. There's the Eraser Tool, the Paint Bucket Tool, which we can't use because we don't have a color. I think it's because we don't have a color display. There's the Color Suck Tool. I think that's what it's called. I'm not an artist, so I really don't know. Paintbrush Tool. You can use this to doodle. Pencil Tool. Spray paint or airbrush tool, and smear tool. This allows you to take something and smear it around. Go ahead and undo that. You can create a water effect using this liquefy effect. And I'm not exactly sure what this does. Okay, I don't really know what it does, so we'll go ahead and take a look at Photoshop's about this program. This is version 0.63, dated October 2nd, 1988. Copyright 1988, Thomas Knoll. It even has his phone number there. I wonder what would happen if we called that number. And it is not for distribution, so this is obviously a very early version of Photoshop. I don't have any photos, digital photos, that I can edit on here, but you can see that we have, yeah, we're not going to save changes. But that's just a quick tour of an old version of Adobe Photoshop and what you can do with it. And then as for word processing, you can install Word on here, and there's also programs like Simple Text, which allow you to write very simple documents. Takes a while for it to open here, but in a second we'll see just a little rant I wrote about my piece of crap tech teacher. There we go. I called it the authoritarian because that's exactly what he is. You can see we can change the font size from 9 point to 14 point. We can change the font type, as you can see, to something like shadow. We can change the font itself to, say, New York. And of course we can also, a really cool feature, one of my favorite features of Simple Text, especially on older Macs, is the ability to speak, is the speech feature. So we'll go ahead and select a voice here. Even though it's very hard to understand, we'll select Robovox, my favorite, and you probably won't be able to hear this in the camera, but I'll turn the audio up so you can, in the editing, so you can try to hear it. So we'll go ahead and speak it. And it was very quiet because the internal speaker on this machine is very quiet, but So you probably can't hear it in the video, but it speaks whatever you have as part of I think it's Macintosh was the name of it back in the day. We'll go ahead and quit here and save our changes because I actually like what I did here. So that's a quick tour of the Macintosh Classic II for today. We'll go ahead and shut it down just to show how it's really old school because it does not support soft power. It is a hard power machine, so when you shut it down, it will tell you it is now safe to switch off your Macintosh. You flip the switch and you can turn the computer off. So there you have it, a brief little tour of the Macintosh Classic II from 1991. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.